Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Gather Gurus podcast. My name is Katie Moser. I'm the Director of Marketing and Business Development for GoGather. Very excited to have a special guest on with us today, Lisa Peterson. Lisa is an expert in communications with a very robust background in working on corporate communications, events, and all of the awesome stuff that goes along with all of that. So we have a really great conversation today to speak a little bit about how you can incorporate that into your event plans, why communications is so important for events and businesses, and get some insights from her on how to take that and run with it within your own organization. So, Lisa, thank you so much for being here.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Love to start out just a little bit of your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you've been doing lately. I know there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in your world and kind of your expertise.
Great, happy to. There has been a lot of exciting stuff lately in my world. So I just returned to being a business owner. I have my own company called Moxified Consulting, which is a lot of fun. It's, for me, a great opportunity to balance better the role of being a executive and a mom, which is not easy to do these days. And so at Moxified Consulting, we work with companies and leaders to help build their brand voice and connect with the audiences that matter most to them. Moxified is really built on what is more than a 20-year career in marketing and communications. And as part of that is events, because events are an incredible channel for reaching the audiences that you care about most, whether it's your internal audiences or your external audiences. And marketing communications plays a tremendous role, in my opinion, not only in bringing together an effective event, but making sure that you're getting a return on that investment.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, we talk about that so much in the world that we're in. You know, events are coming back so strong, and it's so important for businesses to be able to define the importance of those events, how it's helping their business, and all the different pieces that are tied into that. So I'd love to start kind of a little bit with how you've seen both the event landscape and the communications and marketing landscape shifting in the last few years, especially coming out of COVID. And, you know, there's been a lot of changes. So what have you seen, and how is that, how are you working on that with your clients?
Right. Yeah, good question. I mean, obviously COVID threw everyone for a loop, personally and professionally. And I think, there was probably much chatter at the time around, well, what will this mean for the long-term strategy of events? And, are trade shows dead, for example, right? Will we ever come together in large groups? And, at the time, we all felt like the world was ending, but it didn't end. We are making our way back to being in person, and I think that people and companies value the opportunity to connect in person, but there's also maybe a higher level of scrutiny around the investments that companies are willing to make in these events. And that could be events like trade shows, for example, and being more thoughtful about which trade shows a company attends and which ones they don't. But also company-sponsored events, whether they're bringing together employees or customers or prospects. I think it's always important to start with what it is that you want that event to accomplish and how is that part of a broader strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that as well. So many companies are coming to us asking how to help them build out that first piece before they even get to the event. Like, why are we even hosting this? What is the strategy behind it? And I think communications and marketing and the strategy that is built within those within those departments within an organization can really be transferred into that event side of things.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear your thoughts around, why are communications so important for events, and how can companies be mindful of that as they start to build their event plan?
Sure. Communications or marketing, you might call it, they're certainly cousins, right? Mm-hmm. The functions are cousins. Marketing and communications often work hand in hand, and depending on your organization, you might have communications as part of marketing or marketing as part of communications, or event as a part of, either of those functions as well. So I may use the two, marketing and communications, interchangeably. But when you're starting out planning for an event, it's really important to think about, like I said, what's the objective? What are you trying to accomplish here? And in my experience, a really savvy communicator is a great partner to have in the room as those discussions are kicking off, right? Because in communications, we're thinking about the audience, what we need to communicate to the audience, what we want them to walk away knowing, what do we want them to do with the information. And then, your communications partner can help you think through, once I have my objectives and I know what I'm looking to accomplish and I figured out who this audience is and maybe why they care about coming to the event, then it's thinking about what's the content and what's the experience I'm going to create at the event in order to, get my target audience to do what I want them to do, right? And I think that it's not that communications has a role to play necessarily in every step in the event planning and execution process, but I really think companies can get more out of their events when they bring in that communications partner, or maybe it's a marketing person who can help them think through what is the real objective for this time that we're planning together, and what is it that we want to walk away knowing that we accomplished.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, we see it so often that companies are just concerned first with, where are we going to do this? How do we get this moving? The mechanics,
yeah.
Exactly. And it's so hard to take a step back. Sometimes when you're going, okay, we need to have this event in 6 months. Okay, we got to get the venue because that is, the primary piece. But there's a need to step back and really talk about, why are we even doing this?
Right.
Right. And what, you can't have a location if you don't know your attendees are going to show up.
Right.
You can't host the event somewhere or put together an agenda structure if you don't have those basics put together. It's like building a marketing campaign,
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I love that. It's taking a step back and really looking at the bigger picture and, reminding yourself that at the end of the day, when you have an event, it's about the attendees.
Right. And I think, for everyone in that room to think about what's the experience we're trying to create for these attendees is really important, because that not only will inform your communication strategy, which we'll, hopefully get into in a little bit, but also the planning and logistics. Because if you need to have people working in small groups, for example, and you only have one giant room, that might not actually be the right setting for your event, right? So I think that you're right. So often companies are, well, we got to set a date, we got to get a location, we need to start the contracts process. And I think for, savvy event planners, they're like, time out. What are we actually doing this event for? And that helps you then curate, the right venue and thinking about how do we, make this more of an experience that people are going to get more out of their investment.
Yeah, absolutely. I could go on and on about the attendee experience and how many different ways you could break that up and change that. And it's, if you don't have those conversations up front, I don't think you can have a very good conversation about attendee experience.
Well, and I've seen where, and I've been a part of this, unfortunately, where in an organization, we're not clear going in to the event what it is that we're going to accomplish and who's going to be a part of it. And then you're trying to almost scramble and retrofit everything to accommodate this bigger vision that, had you just taken the time to define that and get everyone on the same page at the beginning, maybe it would be a lot easier in the long run. It'd probably save time and money in the process.
Yeah. I think of it like putting together a new recipe, or if you don't actually read it beforehand, you're scrambling the whole time you're cooking, and it's the worst.
No
it's
pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd love to hear a little bit more. I guess, it's funny, my next question was going to be about attendee experience, but how can you actually put the mechanics of communications into play in your events to improve attendee experience? Can you give some examples of how you've done that in the past?
Yeah, definitely. I think from that point, you're really starting to think about the content. You know who your audience is. You know what you want to accomplish. So the next step is thinking about the content that's going to, give them kind of, I'm thinking about a sales meeting, for example, right? And we know at a high level the objective is to go out and sell, right? Sell more, probably. But what's going to enable that sales representative to sell more? What do they need to know? Is it product training? Is it selling skills training? Is it time networking with colleagues in their geographic region, right? So you have to think about the content and how you're going to deliver that content for the event participants. And that includes everything from thinking about not only the logistics of the space that you've procured, but also who needs to be involved. Are there executives? Are they a talking head? Are you doing panel discussions? Is there Q&A, right? I think you have to really think through almost like step by step, what is it going to take to bring this together? Because oftentimes then you can start to figure out not just the content, but like what's the way that the content needs to be prepared in order to be shared most effectively.
Yeah. I love the idea of building like a visual roadmap, like you would do with any sort of campaign, right? What are all the different, bringing in the agenda and how are the different touch points coming into it and being able to show that to like a leadership team and say, this is all the areas where we need to bring this in and then this is how we're going to execute it. Do you have any recommendations on when you are presenting this to a leadership team that has to approve all the different pieces that are going to the event? I know that can sometimes be a difficult process. Do you have any recommendations for how to present that content, strategies for convincing people that this is necessary?
Right. Yeah, I think it's never easy to do, right? Because events, if you're going to do them well, chances are you're making a sizable investment, right?
Yeah.
And most executives are concerned about the P&L and how this fits in, right? So I think what can really help is creating, to the best of your ability, a mock-up of what attendees may see and experience, right? Mm-hmm. And thinking about all those different touch points and being able to present a visual. This is how the room is going to be set up. Here's some examples of the branding that attendees are going to see. Here's some of the key messages that we envision getting across, right? And trying to give them and it's a balance because they don't have as much mental bandwidth for a lot of detail, right? The logistics, I don't think, is where you need an executive to buy in. You need them to buy into the reason that you're having the event, right? And help them understand what it's going to accomplish, what their role is going to be, and, setting some metrics as a baseline that you can come back to them and say, hey, here were the 5 areas that we thought were important to measure. Here's how we did against our baseline or against past events, and really be able to demonstrate to them what the return on that investment is going to be.
Yeah, I love that. Do you have, I'm going off script here a little bit, so I'm tossing some fun questions at you, but do you have some examples of things that you've implemented that have been very successful at events that you would say to a client, this is absolutely necessary or this would be really effective for your event?
Yeah. I mean, this is where my marketing background comes in, and I think about how many times it takes the average person to absorb a message, right? And in the olden days, we said like 6 or 7 times they'd have to hear your message before they would, sort of clue in and maybe start to take action. But in today's world, I mean, that's like 6,000, right? Because we're all being inundated from devices and experiences. So when you have someone at an event, you have the great thing about that is they're a captive audience, right? So maximize every opportunity to reinforce the key messages. And, that can be signage, and even better when that signage is in unexpected places. Think about if you're in a hotel, for example, what are all the different parts of the hotel that your attendees are going to be in? How can you integrate your brand and your messaging into those spots? It could be panels in the elevator, panels in the restrooms, something that is left in their room each day, right, after the event, or, something that they receive as part of like a welcome gift or when they check in, right? So not just the four walls, if you will, of that conference room, but thinking outside of the room specifically and using all that is available to you in reaching that very captive audience, which is super rare, right? And it doesn't have to just be physical pieces, but it can also be leveraging digital technology so that, messages are popping up on their phone as they're going by different, potentially parts of, a very large destination, right? I've even had a client recently who invested in doing airport advertising.
Yep.
So as in this case, it was customers coming in for a big user conference, and how did as they were making their way to the destination, right? Like airport advertising, advertising in the back of transportation, right? Advertising at the hotel. All of those things start to seed in someone's brain. And, they're not going to see it every time because they're probably on their phone.
Yeah.
So also how can you leverage that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said about unexpected places because it starts to make people feel like they're special in a way, especially if they're coming into, let's say, an internal conference, right? If they start to see their brand in the airport, in the Uber ride, I mean,
it's so exciting.
It's very cool, and it I think makes them pay more attention. Like, where else can I find little, Easter eggs or things like that? And I love thinking outside the box, like you said. It's not just the traditional signage. There could be so many opportunities for getting in front of people. And like you said, the captive audience, we are all on our phones all the time, and it's very hard to get in front of people. I mean, we struggle with this both with our clients and with, marketing as more and more digital channels come up.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think the unique opportunity that events present is that you can use a mix of digital channels to reach attendees as well as the physical. Because again, you're bringing people together for an objective, and one of those objectives is almost always to connect, right? So thinking about also how are you facilitating the ability for people to connect easier. When in the past when I've attended incentive trips and you're at a resort, and while you might be the majority of the people, you're not the only people, right? And so how do you create either, a visual demarcation that, you and I are from the same company, so we can strike up a conversation at the breakfast buffet or in the elevator, right? Is there a destination that attendees can all go to at any time, right? To be able to network with one another. So it's just thinking about those objectives that you started with in the planning process, and then getting creative with what are the channels, both physical, tangible, and digital, that you can use to start to then achieve those objectives.
Yeah, I love it. Another question I have that just came up in my brain, so I apologize. I keep throwing curveballs at you. But,
I love it.
I'd love the idea of thinking about the actual communications themselves, right? The wording that you're using, the things that you're saying throughout the conference. I mean, how do you keep it from getting stale, right?
Right.
Or keep the message from getting too, cliche or repetitive?
Yeah.
What are some strategies that you would recommend there?
It's, that's tough. I mean, I know there's been times where we've knocked it out of the park, and other times where we've gotten, we heard the same message over and over again. Well, I mean, that's sort of by design,
that's the point.
Right?
Yeah.
We want you to walk away with a very clear understanding of the ask. But, I think that there's a balance between figuring out the right variety of messages and then how much you're repeating them in maybe slightly different ways, right? And so, if you're trying to get across maybe 10 different points, even in a span of, let's say 3 days, that's a lot of information that you're expecting people to walk away with, right? So that's where coming back to the beginning of the process and making sure that everyone is aligned on what's the objective here? What is it that our attendees actually care about, right? And then how do we frame whatever those messages are in language that makes sense to the attendees? And I mean, I've done it, but the corporate jargon, the business speak, right? We all think it sounds good, but real people don't talk that way in real conversations, right? That's why we play like corporate buzzword bingo, right? So trying to make your messaging real and relatable, right? And you can do that by keeping things more informal, a conversational tone, right? If you feel the need for something that is more corporate, right? There's a time and a place. Maybe that's where the CEO's address, right? He or she's got very clear message that they want to send. How do you then build off of that and the other touch points of the experience and reinforce it in a way that's relatable to the audience that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about making it a little bit more casual, relatable, because that's what events are too. It's the human piece. People are so used to the digital piece of the world, right? Like, why not lean into the human aspect? Because when else are you really going to get to have that opportunity, right?
Right. And I think don't be afraid to take some chances, because you do have people together. Think about, well, how can my messaging spark more conversation and dialogue amongst the attendees, right? And allowing for them to maybe even add to it, right? And getting them engaged in the dialogue and discussion, right? Asking them to maybe share, what does the brand mean to you? Or, why are you committed to the company's mission, right? Just getting your attendees more involved in being part of the content, if you will, of your event also helps to drive home the point so much more.
Yeah, I love that. Get them involved in the conversations from the get-go.
Absolutely.
That kind of leads into my next question about, how can you leverage events to create content for your brand, and what are the different ways that you can collect that on site beforehand, afterwards? Do you have any recommendations there?
I do. I mean, look, if you're doing an event, I sure hope you're thinking about it in the context of a broader plan for the year, right? And again, whether that's, let's say a sales meeting or maybe it's a customer meeting, right? The event, yes, the event needs its own strategy and plan, but the event itself is not a strategy, right? You need the event to be part of a broader marketing strategy that has touch points throughout the year. And I think this is something that people struggle with because it can be confusing, right? You're like, but we're having this whole event and you want us to make a plan and have a strategy and it has messages, but now you're saying I need another strategy. So let me explain, right? When you're approaching, let's say 2025, right? And you're thinking about what you're going to need to accomplish for your business, you should be setting goals and setting out a strategy to accomplish those goals. And an event might be part of that strategy, right? And so when you're then beginning your event planning process, you're thinking about, okay, this is part of a broader strategy. You probably already, because of that, have some very clear objectives for the event, right? And we talked about how important it is to align on those, be clear on who your audience is and what you want them to take away. And then you start building content for the event. Or is it for the event only? It shouldn't be. You should be thinking about, I'm building this content, I'm making a lot of, investment of time, energy, resources, cash, right, to this event. So I want to leverage this content well beyond the actual event. And that could be in the lead up to the event. How do you maybe take, teaser content for a presenter or speaker that you're going to have featured at the event and use it as a way to hype people up in advance, right? But then how are you going to take maybe some of the learnings that people gathered from that speaker or presentation and then feed it back into the organization more broadly after the event? So it's always thinking about the event is a massively important tactic as part of a broader marketing plan, and making sure that whatever happens at that event, someone is thinking about, okay, what aspects can be used after the fact, right? And you could be taking content from a sales meeting, like let's say you have a customer story come in. A customer come in, they tell a story about how they use their product and the impact that it had. That's great. Everyone at the event feels good. But what about all your other customers? Can you share this on social media? Can it be part of an email campaign to solicit more testimonials, right? So I think it's just, we get so busy planning for the event, and then we're like, I did it. Great job, everyone. But it's like, there was all this content here, all this investment. Let's do more with it. And I worked at a company where they would create a separate theme for their commercial meetings. Okay. So that's kind of cool, right? But then you couldn't use that theme the rest of the year. Only at the meeting when people were together. How does that make sense? We just spend all this time and money building out this theme, but now we can't reference it? Shouldn't this be the rallying cry for the entire year? So that's where, if you really want to get, especially your executives, more bought in to events as an important investment in building culture, your brand, growing your business, you got to think about how you're going to use the event and all the content created for it long after the event has concluded.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes to proving the value of the investment you're making, right? It's beyond just a one-time thing. If you're creating content that you can use, like you said, the case study for your other clients, you're like, well, now this could bring in so much more ROI for us, and it's beyond just the event. I love all the points you just made there, 'cause it's making me think about how we can help our clients implement these types of things, right, and help them think beyond the event. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for all of your amazing insight. I love this conversation.
Thank you.
It's fun to have a little bit of a mind meld with marketing and your background. I definitely will continue picking your brain after this meeting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Katie, for having me.
Thank you.